It don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting.
All right, cool. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to For The Hayters podcast. If you're new here, my name is Becky, and I am your host. We are joined here by Laura, who's a co-host and writer.
What's up, everyone?
I don't know, every time you said it, I always laugh.
I don't know what's funny about those three words. But.
And then I don't know if this is the first time for this season or I don't know if we've ever had two people on at once.
Podcast, yes. Video, no. So this is a new first.
So you guys are in for a treat. So today we're joined by Devin and Jess. If you guys want to say hi. Just
at the same time is fine.
I was waiting for her to go first.
In unison.
Hey.
Hi.
All right.
We're not awkward at all.
It's totally fine.
We're professionals.
I thrive off awkwardness,
Nice.
So we'll do just fine. So to get started, and to give everyone a forewarning, I don't know how long this episode's gonna be. It might go past the hour that we normally do, but I mean, I feel like this is a pretty relevant and important topic to talk about because it relates to every single person. A lot of our podcasts only...
They're somewhat niche.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty ubiquitous.
So, if one of you want to start, I don't know who wants to go first. I figured that you guys could kind of just give us a little background of both of you. Mm-hmm. I know that there's points that we want to talk about, and then we'll get there after that, after we kind of know you and your story. Mm-hmm. So if you guys want to battle it out to see who
Jess goes first.
Let's arm myself. That's fine. I would have won it anyways.
It's true.
So in terms of like our story for DIY or just like my own personal, like how I got involved or how we came up with it?
I would say like how you got involved and like what caused you to, start it.
Okay, so my personal story, I mean, I guess going back to like way back when I was younger, I was never one of those people who grew up like picturing my wedding or like actually even envisioning it at all. So I would say that I was pretty untraditional in that sense. And so I was dating my now husband. We've been together for 10 years, but we're dating long distance. And ultimately, I wound up moving from New York to Philadelphia to be with him. And that was around like 5 years into our relationship. And he proposed, and everyone was like, oh my God, congrats. And I was like, wait, like, thanks, but now do I have to like have a wedding? Like, is that what comes after the proposal? And so once we kind of got it started with planning the wedding, I found myself kind of falling into what I thought was expected of me rather than doing what I actually truly wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so we wound up booking a venue because obviously you need a place to get married if you have a wedding, and realizing that we didn't want to get married at that venue a couple months later, called off the venue, lost a lot of money down the line, and decided to do things our own way and have more of a traditional, not a non-traditional backyard wedding with just like friends, family, music, good food. But so throughout that process, really found myself questioning why I was going through with all of these steps that I thought were expected of me and like knowing that I didn't want to actually do them.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Thanks.
And there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The extended cut.
Yeah.
So my story is a little bit different than Jess's. I was in a long-term relationship with someone. We dated for a total of 6 years, lived together, on paper, looked like we had the ideal relationship. We were from the same town. We had siblings who were close in age together. At the time when we first met, we were working in similar industries. We ended up getting engaged and planning a wedding, and 90 days before we were supposed to get married, I found out he had been cheating on me for the past 6 months. So on the spot, called everything off and was like, get out of the house, we're done. Mm-hmm. And had to deal with the fallout of, canceling my wedding and also ending a really serious long-term relationship. that's what led me to wanting to start DIY. And Jess we had worked together at the time, but she was sort of there through all the highs and lows that I went through. She was there when we were dating, when we got engaged, and saw how excited I was. But then she was also there when things started to get sort of bad between us, and I was starting to question the relationship. And then ultimately when we decided to break up, and I just knew that I really needed a place to turn to when I was going through such a hard time, and there just wasn't anything out there that existed. And it was so important for me to have a support system of friends and family who I could trust and, had my best interests at heart. And I know not everyone's fortunate enough to have that when going through something pretty difficult.
And then, so it's DIY relationships?
So the company is DIY Breakup.
Breakups. Okay, that's what. Okay. If you kind of want to just touch on that and explain like what it is and where people can find it and the premise behind it.
Yeah. So DIY Breakup is a community that was created to support a called off engagement. It's when I was going through it, I realized people didn't want to talk about calling off an engagement or canceling your wedding. There was a lot of embarrassment attached to it, or there was a stigma attached to it that, oh, that poor person, oh, how terrible for them. So it wasn't something where people were outwardly or openly sharing their stories of the breakup that they went through. So DIY Breakup, one of the biggest things we're doing is just creating a community that people can go to when they're going through a difficult breakup. But we also offer a lot of ways and recommendations on how to recoup the cost of a called off wedding. So we offer or give recommendations on where you can sell your dress, your decorations, your engagement ring. But then we recently launched our vendor listing page, so you can list your photographer, florist, your venue, in the hopes that someone would rebook it, so you're not liable for paying for the entire cost of the wedding, even though it's not happening.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
And,
most contracts will say you have to pay us in full, regardless if you have it or not. And that's something Jess experienced when she booked a venue and then canceled it and was out that money.
Yeah, and so like those are a huge part of like why, like those are pretty much all of the reasons why we started to focus on like there's something missing. Like if you are engaged to someone and you decide that your plans have changed and you no longer want to go through with it, why is there not a support system out there for people that are going through that? Like why do they have to feel like, number one, they're alone, and also two, have a financial loss? So like what can we do to help people who are going through situations similar to ours, although Devin and I experienced very different things when planning a wedding and like leading up to it, but at the same time, like we both were kind of like, well, now what do we do? And like there wasn't really much out there. And like when you're calling off a wedding or you're canceling a venue or whatever it is, the last thing you want to do is like Google, like, where can I go to sell my dress? Like no one wants to do that. And so like how can we help and consolidate all of this information so that people that have plans change can like go to this one spot and find everything they need.
You don't feel stuck. Yeah, I think a big thing for me, and when I leading up to everything and before I found out that he was cheating on me, like I wanted to end the relationship, and it was so hard for me to justify doing that because we had so much history together, number one, but also we had spent the past year planning for a wedding, and I thought about my parents and they'd be out thousands of dollars and how could I do that to them? And I think since we launched DIY, a lot of people have reached out just saying, I wish I would have canceled it before, but I was afraid to because of those same reasons. Like it was just easier to go through with it and then get divorced later. And the moment that's what they felt, and then they found out it's not easier to get divorced. It's actually a lot more expensive and complicated. But I think just having an outlet for people to go to where they just don't feel like you only have one option.
Yeah, it's
No, good. Good.
I know that you talk about these like social standards and social, this pressure that you get from what other people are doing and what people are watching. And it's interesting because, I don't know if I've ever like sat down and thought about like the heartache that someone goes through in a breakup when they're breaking off a engagement, because you're so focused on the wedding that like your life just like ended in a sense too, right? Like you have to begin a new life afterwards. Because I mean, I've been through breakups before and like they're awful, like they're like terrible, and to have to add that on top of it, and I can 100% see how it's just like overlooked, like the feelings and the emotions behind, you know, the breakup and dealing with this loss of someone, but you have all this financial and social pressure that's just like eating everything else up.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to process in the moment, and you don't even know where to start because it's you want to take care of yourself first, but then you have all of these extra things to deal with on top of it. And it's like you were probably living together, and then you have to notify your guests, and every time you tell someone, they want to know the story. And it's just so many things to tackle, and that just are all of a sudden on your plate that it's extremely overwhelming, and it just adds another layer that no one wants to deal with. I mean, like you said, it's going through your breakup, you're sad, you're processing it, especially a long-term one. It was like I had to, you know, break up with the future I thought I was going to have with this person. So I was just completely, again, overwhelmed by everything that I had to deal with all of a sudden in that moment. And it came out of nowhere. It was like one day we're fine, next, you know, it's like, see ya.
Yeah.
It's almost, I feel like in a way, it's almost more tragic than, and this is not to discount people who go through divorce or whose parents have gone through divorce, but there are divorce support groups. There are lawyers to help you, you know, divide assets and figure out how to, you know, sort of, I guess, navigate your way through these situations. But you just, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, you're saying goodbye to a future that you didn't have. And you're alone doing this. And I feel like people, I've never heard of something like this where people are dedicating a community, or a cause, rather, to help a community of these people through this. My mom actually called off an engagement and then a week later met my father, so it was kind of, I guess she was fine.
Yeah.
But it's tough, I'm sure.
And that's the thing too. I think like being here when Devin went through everything she experienced, and like fast forwarding a year and a half or 2 years later, and just seeing like how much, not better, because obviously you were a great person then, but like how much you've learned and grown from that experience. Like you mentioned, like everything's going to be okay, and it might not seem like it in the moment, but like this is happening for whatever reason it's happening, and you will come out better.
Sure. And you want to now help people figure that out for themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful.
I have a really, one of my best friends that went through this situation, and I actually texted her today, and I was like, oh, like, look at the topic that we're discussing today. And she was like, holy shit, like, I wanted to do this because I felt so alone. You know, she had to call off her wedding of a very long-term boyfriend. And, like, she kept sending me screenshots of stuff you guys posted because, like, she just related to it. And she's like, I wish I had this for, you know, when I was going through this. Because, I know the emotional damage that, like, she went through from just not even the loss of the relationship, but from calling off the wedding. Like, there was so much, like, trauma that, like, she went through that, like, you know, I didn't know how she was going to get through it, because, you know, I can't relate to it. You can only sit there and listen, and that's, you know, the premise of kind of what we do here is connect people that have similar stories so that they know that it can get better.
There's a common thread between, I think, what we do and what you do, and so it's nice to have you on for that reason.
Because, I mean, this is something that can literally happen to every single person that is listening, so it's obviously a need to have this type of support because it's not talked about enough. But I mean, it all stems also, I know that you guys had mentioned wanting to talk about it, there's also the underlining aspect of, like, relationships themselves, right? And, you know, staying in relationships longer than you should have because of the social pressure, toxic relationships that is too common in the world that we live in. I don't know if you want to kind of touch on those points a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I was the kind of person who let my relationship define who I was. And I thought that was the most interesting thing about me. And I see a lot of my friends or people that I know in situations like that where you're just investing so much into this one person that you're just determined to make it work. And that's what happened with us. I was just exhausting every option because he was my world. Like, I didn't think that I had any type of life of my own, because I just invested so much of myself and my energy into him and making us this couple. And it was just completely unrealistic and also sad at the same time, because I completely lost who I was. And then if you don't feel like you know who you are as a person, like, how can you feel okay being on your own or standing on your own 2 feet? So I think that's part of what kept me in the relationship for so long, even though it was unhealthy and I wasn't happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a huge issue that's affecting so many people. You know, I have plenty of friends that, you know, are in toxic relationships. I laughed because I just, like, thought about all the people I know that are in toxic relationships. Not that it's funny. It's just, like, so sad, like...
Very common.
And, like, I've been in, like, very toxic relationships, so I, like, get the thought and feeling that you have, like, going through these. It's like you can be one thing, like, as your own person, and then you get into this relationship and, like, the best qualities about you, like, are just completely removed, right? Like, it's like you lose completely the person you are, and you become so codependent that you're just, like, not your own person anymore.
It's interesting you say that, because we did a podcast recently, and one of the things that really impressed me were the questions that the person who was interviewing us was asking, and I complimented her afterwards, and let her know that I was really impressed with her questions, and she said, "Thank you, it's funny, my ex-boyfriend used to tell me I asked too many questions," and I said, imagine where you would be now if that's who you were with. Like, would you have ever gotten to the point where these questions were ultimately going to be like a profession for you and, like, allow you to connect with so many different people? And it's just really interesting, because I think that we spend a lot of time trying to, like, change people and think that they're going to change for us. But at the end of the day, like, what I learned, at least, like, of course no one's perfect and you're always going to be working on yourself, but why like spend all this time trying to change someone when you can find someone who you like as they are?
Yeah.
It's a very good point.
And I mean, there's constant growth in relationships, right? It's constant work. Like, every single day, I talk about a lot. I'm like a very big, like, helpless romantic. Like, I just love. I, like, love seeing people thrive in, like, healthy relationships. I just lost my train of thought.
What you love.
No, there's
don't change people.
Oh no, like, so what I was gonna say is, it's always a choice, right? Like, every morning you wake up and you have to choose to love that person, and you have to choose to grow and change on your own. It's not like a change who you are, but there's gonna be certain things that you have to work on, to complement each other. But I want to touch on toxic relationships a little bit more, because there's just how do you have any friends that are in toxic relationships? How do you handle how you give advice or how you deal with them?
It's tough, because you don't want to overstep when you give advice, and I mean, Jess and I have, like, a very personal story when it comes to this, because she saw sort of our relationship just crumble, and she was one of the only people that I was ever truly honest with about the issues that we were having, and that I was starting to have doubts, and I didn't feel as if he was being a fair partner to me, and I was questioning whether or not I actually wanted to marry this person. And one day, Jess and we used to just, like, walk around the city when we worked together and
aimlessly
talk and have therapy sessions with one another.
Yeah,
but she said to me she was so hesitant to even bring this up, and it took her, like, a few minutes and, like, tries to get it out.
That's what you think. It took me, like, a week. I practiced it in my head.
Okay, well, this is my experience with it. But I was like, but what is it? And she was like, have you, and she's like, I don't want to say this because I don't want to put something in your head that's not there, and I don't want to affect how you feel for him, and God forbid this is not happening, but have you ever considered that he might be cheating on you? And I think that was really scary for her as my friend to say that, because you don't know how I would receive it. luckily for her, I was receptive, and I was
Right.
like, I haven't thought of that.
We also don't want to plant the seed of paranoia if
Right.
it's untrue.
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
I mean, granted, you hit the nail on the head, but
Yeah, she was very careful in the way that she approached it, and she
Good.
had a ton of information and was sort of collecting some thoughts, and she was like a little behind the scenes detective with it.
that's a
but
good friend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Very
very
good
good
friend.
friend. But she was afraid to approach me about it because she was like, again, God forbid if I'm wrong, I don't want to affect your relationship in any type of negative way. You guys are obviously struggling already, but I think it's difficult to approach friends about situations because I think, at least from my experience, anytime I've given advice about their relationship, it's never received well.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have to figure it out for themselves, and people don't feel comfortable talking about being in a toxic relationship. They don't like admitting that their partner could be unfair to them, or their significant other's treating them poorly. It's like it feels embarrassing.
Sure.
And
Well-
it's difficult to have like real conversations about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because I think that you said like you were receptive to it, but like, and you mentioned that, you opened up and like we became close, but like at the same time, I think that something that's important when you have a friend that's going through something is like sometimes they just want to talk and don't want advice, like they just want to be heard, and like as a friend you need to kind of know like, okay, like does this person want to hear me lecture them on why they shouldn't
Right.
be doing these things, or do they
Yeah.
want me to
Yeah.
just smile and like nod and be like, man,
Yeah.
that sucks. And so like I think like also knowing what your friend needs from you, which is like not always easy, but just like trying to understand like, do you want my, even asking like, do you want my opinion, or you just really want like to talk?
Right.
I think it's hard if you've never been in a toxic relationship to also understand why people do the things they do when they're in one. I have friends, like friend groups where there's, people inside them that are in toxic relationships, and the other people that are in that friend group have never been in one. And so they are like, well, why? Like, we keep telling them the same thing. I'm like, listen, like, you can go blue in the face telling them like what to do or advice, but they're not going to listen until until they choose this, right? Like, and it's hard. I think my biggest thing with toxic relationships with people is there's always a point, if they stay with them long enough, that like they stop telling you all the bad things just because they want to protect them in what they do. And so they're living with all of this negative energy because they don't have anyone to talk to about it, because they're just protecting them at that point. This person that doesn't deserve to be protected, they live with all of that like just hurt and anger, and it just makes everything 20 times worse. And it makes it harder to leave. I've like lost friends over toxic like relationships, like really good friends. I've like lost myself in toxic relationships, so I just like am so sad anytime like anyone is in it or like seeing them through it, All right, toxic relationship. I
Could talk about it for hours.
I know, it's like, and I don't want to like, I'm trying to tiptoe around like me bashing anyone in my past of like, but I don't even know how to explain. It's
Becky's operating with a lot of restraint right now.
Yeah.
like I don't think any of my exes would want to listen to me like talk, but
Just don't name them.
But like I feel like someone that would listen would just like send it to them, and I'm not trying to like stir up dirty laundry. But like I've personally like been in relationships where I've lost like my best friends because of my relationship, and totally my fault. Like completely cutting them out because the person that I was with didn't want them in my life anymore. And like I'm a pretty confident person. I've never really like struggled in that aspect. And I've dated someone where I've never been so like unconfident in my like entire life. Like I was insecure, like so insecure that I didn't even know it was possible for me to be that insecure. And like when these things happen to people, like these aren't like good things. And people don't realize, you'll like notice it 2 weeks, 3 weeks into meeting someone, like all these like red flags will like keep like coming up and popping up. And I don't know, are there any like flags that you can think of that like people like signs to like stay away from people that you can think of?
I mean, there can be a million different red flags to stay away from. I think some of the biggest ones for me are things that I overlooked in the beginning of the relationship was just the fighting, and we couldn't communicate with each other at all. Like, he was constantly gaslighting me. I was always feeling misunderstood or that my feelings were unreasonable, and he was never willing to meet me halfway. And it was about the dumbest things too, like things that didn't matter, and I didn't at the time realize how that would carry over into more serious issues. But it's like, how can you marry someone that can't even agree on like who takes out the trash, and it ends up like you're at each other's throat over it. And I don't know why I thought we would be able to like buy a house or have a family or like be able to have like joint finances and stuff and be able to make these adult decisions if we couldn't agree on anything. And just he had a lot of control over me and was constantly bringing out my flaws and throwing things in my face and making me feel like I had all these things that were wrong with me that like I need to fix. But it was mostly like a projection of him and how he feels about himself. But those were things that were all there from the beginning.
I feel like, okay, like the list that you just rattled off, like those are very good examples of toxicity that people tend to overlook. Because I think that maybe we overuse the word toxic. I mean, it could be, but not we in this in this room. I just meant like in general, because I think that people think that you have to be getting abused in some way, or there's infidelity. Like, there are like more serious hallmarks of a toxic relationship that people immediately think of, and they cross them off their list. If they don't exist, then I can't be in a toxic relationship. But everything you just said, I mean, I know that he did cheat on you, but the laundry list you just rattled off, those are issues that are so much more common, right? The prevalence is I mean, I think it's so much greater. And people don't put any stock in them. And they don't realize that like, not agreeing on chores or not feeling like you're understood, that's going to snowball into divorce. Like, there's no way around that.
Yeah, and it all stems from just, a lack of communication.
Yeah.
Or lack of desire to communicate, which might be worse.
Yeah, like, I think fighting is normal to like, everyone fights, but like, what comes from them? Like, are you continuing to have the same arguments over and over, or are you able to sit down and be like, hey, like, this is how I'm feeling, significant other, great, this is how I'm feeling, and then you move on, and like, maybe now you fight about something different, but like, constantly the same thing over and over, it's like someone's gonna lose their mind.
You never feel hurt.
Yeah.
And it's
not
also
the relationship for you.
learning how to fight, because like, some people fight to hurt, and like, there's a difference between fighting to hurt someone than there is fighting because like you're upset about something.
Yeah. Sure.
And like, and I think that that's another line that people don't, and it takes a lot of work to understand that. And I know like, in my personal relationship now, like, I need to be handled a certain way when I'm upset, and like, that's, if I'm angry, or like, there's certain ways that calm me down, and there's certain things that will just like trigger me into like a spiral of like upset. I'm an emotional person, so and like, thank God, like, Leah has taken the time to like learn those things. When we first got together, it wasn't like that. Like, the way that she would respond would just trigger me into other like automatic like downfalls. But over the past we've been together for almost 4 years. 4 years we've been together, it's been like an obvious change of, both parts working together. And I'm sure that, being with someone, you said 10 years, right?
Yeah, I lost count. I think it's like 10-ish. I think I'm rounding down, actually. But yeah, about that.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken from your relationship of 10 years? What are the best, like, things that you've learned that like are important to like the longevity and the happiness of you both?
Yeah, I feel like a grandma, and like, I don't have children or grandchildren, but like, I think that one of the most important things is communication, and just feeling like you're able to communicate how you're feeling without, putting too much, not emotion behind it, but like, if you have something to say, you should be able to say it, and like, without the other person just constantly being on the defense. So like, figuring out how to effectively have those type of conversations is so helpful, because so much can be lost in like a miscommunication, and then it just is like, well, why'd you say this if you meant that? And like, I remember when my husband and I first started dating, I would be like, it's cold out or something, and he'd be like, well, do you want me to get a jacket? I'm like, no, I'm just saying that it's cold out. And be like, do you want me to do? And like, there was just so much miscommunication, and eventually I was like, listen, Joe, like, if I'm saying like this, it's because I mean this. I'm not asking for like you to do these other things. Right. Like, this is what it is. And he's like, oh, okay. So like, you know, but like, it took that conversation for us to understand, like, when I say it's cold out, I'm just simply saying it's cold out, and like, I don't want his jacket or whatever it is. And like, that's a silly example of it, but like, to kind of sum it up, communication, and just like know how to effectively communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jess should have been a therapist in her past life, honestly. Or she was, or she should be.
Maybe I was.
Yeah, I said that wrong. You were.
Maybe.
And you could be a therapist now, but I would go to her about all the communication issues that my ex and I were having, because we just could not see eye to eye on anything. And it was getting really bad. And one of the things she brought up is like, well, when you do go to him and like you are upset, like, how are you telling him? And I made it more about like how I was feeling, not so much about like his actions, or not making it seem like, well, you did this, which your intent was to make me feel this way. It was just like, no, when you did this, like, I felt really sad inside, and just being able to explain myself in a different way. And she was like, see how he reacts to it. Like, if he's receptive, like, that's a good sign. And he wasn't. But I always thought that was like really good advice.
That
and
is
it's like,
really good
she
advice.
brought it back to just like, how do we speak to each other? How do we fight with each other? But when we got into arguments, he would name call him. Like, once you rip that Band-Aid off and he's just saying stuff to make me feel like shit, it's like, how can you ever have a productive conversation or a relationship?
Right. And that's to Becky's point earlier, that people throw daggers with their words just to hurt.
Yeah.
To, you know, that's not an effective strategy. I feel like there are people who hurt each other with the intention of progressing. I think sometimes when you name call or you sort of degrade a person, it's probably not the best thing in the world, the best strategy, but I think it's in an effort to get them to open their eyes to what they're doing. But if it's
or
just...
to feel the pain that they're feeling. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, maybe it's both. Maybe it's a little bit of both. And that, I don't think, is the worst thing in the world, but when you're doing it just to offend a person.
Yeah.
Where you know, what's your game plan there?
Was that a question to me, or just
No,
saying
rhetorical. Yes, Becky, what is your game plan?
How long have you and your ex been broken up?
Almost 2 years now.
Okay. So I'm interested in knowing, have you dated since? Okay. I'm interested in knowing the difficulties that you had in your next relationship after him, with the not bringing what he treated you like into, and blaming the next person for it. Because I know that's like a huge issue, and I did that 1,000%.
I try to be really self-aware, and it's something that I've had to spend a lot of time like constantly thinking about. So I've been dating the same person for the past 6 months now, and he is just so different than anyone I've ever dated. He's just like so kind, so nice, so patient, understanding. We don't argue. We talk to each other when either one of us is frustrated. I'm not used to it at all. And I started having a lot of anxiety about the relationship probably 3 months in, because things were so calm. And I was waiting for something to go wrong. And I've noticed myself kind of poking at him a little bit, or not doing anything like disrespectful or that he would ever like break up with me for. But I was like pushing buttons a little bit and boundaries and seeing what would happen. And I've caught myself doing that. And I was like, you need to reel back in, because if you push him away, you'll completely regret it. But I have to like just take things really slowly, and I can't get into my own head, and I can't be upset with him for things that my ex did to me. So like I have to trust him. Like I really have to trust him, and that's been the biggest thing. And you know, he hasn't proved me wrong yet, so I just have to, you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No,
but
I always tell my friends that, like, and I don't always follow what I tell people, but I can give advice.
I'm the
to
same
people.
way.
But I always tell my friends, you know, when they're worried about something happening or getting into a new relationship, when they're really happy and they're like hesitant because of what could happen, I always say, like, you know, what is the worst that could happen, right? Like you get hurt, like you've been through it before, you're going to be fine. You have to be happy in the moment and like fully believe that everything's going to be okay, because regardless of what happens, you're going to deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's good or bad, you're going to be able to get through it and handle it, but you thinking negatively about anything just affects that like moment and that time and that, you know, the process of this good time that should be with all the negativity. And that took me a lot too, to stop thinking like, oh, well, is she going to leave me, or is she going to do this? Is she going to do that? And just like enjoying more now than ever in anything.
It's a level of vulnerability though that's like I'm sure it's easier said than done.
It is.
Yeah, it takes
is
work.
hard.
Everything's more worthwhile.
It takes,
not, you
but
know.
I mean, it's not just relationships. That's life too. Is changing just that negative thought to kind of like a positive thought. Like make it a different way. Another thing is, you know, to piggyback off of that is, you know, when you stay in a relationship that is toxic, and the longer you stay in it, is the harder it's going to be to, you know, remove those, you know, tendencies and things that you're doing for the next person, right? So like, I wasn't in a toxic relationship for that long, thank goodness. I could not imagine. Like, I know people that are like years and years and years, and I'm just like the person that you've like lost this whole chance of who you were in those years, right? Like, do you ever like, I guess there's nothing productive coming from like thinking about like how to get past things.
I did have a lot of guilt when we broke up, because it was like, how could I let myself get this far with this person?
Yeah.
And when I look at myself, I would think that I'm a strong person and I would never let someone do this to me or take advantage of me or my feelings. And that's exactly what I did. So I had a lot of guilt of missing out on so much of my like early 20s, because we broke up when I was 29. And I really felt like I was never going to get that time back. But then at the same time, like, I've learned so many valuable lessons and so many amazing opportunities and things have come out of us breaking up that I'm almost grateful for this happening to me, because it's completely changed me as a person. So it's tough. And I know people can be super hard on themselves. And, you know, just after Jess and I started DIY, like, one of the main things that people will say to us as to why they don't end a relationship is because of wasted time. They feel like, well, what was it for? You know, what was the point? Like, I invested so much in this.
It's never too late to start over.
It's not. It really isn't. And I feel like my life has just enhanced so much, and I'm just in such a better place, and I would have never been here if it wasn't for this experience with him.
Yeah.
I think it's also okay to view the 6 years that you spent with him as not a waste of time either, because, and you can, maybe it's a question instead of a statement, do you feel like the time you spent with him stifled your growth, or do you feel like you grew in a different way having been in a toxic relationship?
I think I grew in a different way. I think because I was in a relationship, I was able to focus on my career, and I think that aspect of my life advanced a little bit. I wasn't so worried about like finding a boyfriend and going on all these dates, and I was able to put like some type of productive energy into that. He introduced me to a lot of great people that I'm still friends with and I keep in touch with, and I'm so grateful for them. Jess and I wouldn't have gotten this close, so that's also another blessing to come out of it. But yeah, I definitely like learned things and grew in a different way than if I had maybe been dating someone else or had been on my own.
Yeah, and I feel like it also, like, at least for me and my experience prior to meeting my husband or starting dating him, we met in 8th grade, but that's another story. Like, it gave me an expectation of how I never wanted to be treated again. So it was like, okay, I was dating this guy. He was great for some reasons. He was terrible for other ones. And, like, these are the things that I'm not going to have happen to me in the future. And so, like, you kind of, like, check them off your list and you're like, oh, like, you have this quality? Bye. Like, I'll find someone who doesn't. And so it gives you, like, an expectation of how you want to be treated. And, like, well, this is what I don't want. So then clearly I'm moving closer towards what I do want.
Yeah.
Right.
Giving a better understanding.
That's very true.
I don't know if this is a personal question. Do either of you, do you guys go to therapy at all?
No.
You don't?
I just talk to myself. No, I'm kidding. I probably should.
No, I kind of like that one does, one doesn't. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Do you actively go to therapy now?
I do.
Do you think that that going to therapy has helped through the process
1000%.
I feel like that's a silly question. Like, but yeah, I just want to know your personal experience with it.
I mean, some people have good experiences going to therapy. Some people don't. I think you have to find someone that you're able to open up with. And I've been to a therapist before where we had very surface level conversations and it wasn't helpful at all. So you have to find someone who's truly able to help you when you feel comfortable opening up to. I think it was nice for me because I had so many emotions that I was processing and I didn't know where to start. And it was nice to, like, I was so used to being in this relationship where all of my emotions I suppressed a lot because if I voiced them, I would feel crazy and like he would make me feel crazy. So now I'm like flooded with emotions and you feel crazy. It's like, should I be feeling this way? Like, I was never someone who like struggled with anxiety, and now I was finding myself being anxious, and I was like Googling like, what does anxiety feel like? And it was nice to like go to someone and they're like, no, this is completely normal to, you know, be worried about the future because your life just did a 180. So you weren't predicting that. So now you're going to worry about things that might happen to you in the future. Yeah. And just sorting those things out and making sense of everything that happened was helpful. And I don't know if I would have been able to like move on in such a healthy way and so quickly if I hadn't have had that.
Yeah, we're huge advocates of therapy for like a million reasons. But I always find, I mean, I don't know if this is too personal, but so me and Leah broke up for like a month or two in between like, when, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago, I don't know when it was. Irrelevant. We don't like really talk about that time period of our life, but that's when I like started going to therapy. Like right when it happened, I found a therapist because I needed someone to be able to process it. And it probably like saved my life. It was the best decision that I ever made because, you know, it's hard talking to friends about such personal things without them giving advice in a non-productive way, right? So I found that therapists give you like tasks to work on and ways to cope with what you're going through rather than just trying to make you feel better for like for what it is you're going through.
I'm not laughing at you, but I gave Devin a task.
What?
Remember when we wrote down all the things that you liked and what you didn't like?
Yeah, that was before we broke up.
Oh, I was laughing.
Maybe you should be a therapist.
No, she really should.
But I was just laughing because you're like, therapists give you tasks. And I'm like, wait a second.
She really did. I came into work and I don't even remember what set me off, but we had gotten to an argument and I came in and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like I've tried everything. Like, I've tried like planning like nice things for us to do just to reconnect. I've, you know, tried talking to him. No matter what I did, it just always backfired in the worst way. And so I felt like stuck. I didn't know what my next move was. And Jess was like, I need you to go home and I need you to write down on a list all of the things that you don't like about the relationship. Like, what are all of the negative things? And look at that list. And like, out of the things you wrote down, like, what do you think has the ability to change? And then on the right side, put down all the things that you love about the relationship and all the things that you're happy with. And then you need to compare the two. And basically, there was just a whole lot of cons. None of those things were ever changing. And then the things that were on the pro side, or the things that I loved, were things more about me and had nothing to do with him.
Interesting.
So it was like, this is not working. Yeah. And then I remember I burned the paper. I was like, you can never find this. I was so nervous. It was a bad list.
That's funny. That's a good, I mean, it's a good exercise.
It was really eye-opening. It didn't, I mean, in the moment, it didn't get me, I didn't break up with him. It wasn't like he didn't walk through the door and I was like, I made this list and we're done. But it was part of the process of me getting to the point where, okay, like, my eyes are open now, you know, this
I like
is
that.
not
I might
good.
use that with
You
some
should.
of my friends.
Lists are great.
Yeah.
Yeah. One piece of advice that my therapist gave me at the time that I've used now, which I think is super important for people to know getting into relationships, is, you know, in toxic relationships, the one thing that we lose is ourselves. We become like this one person that, or like one relationship. And she explained to me how and it makes sense, but, you know, it's so important to be individuals, right? Like complete individuals in your own lives. Like, you know, being able to go out and do what you want to do by yourself, not as a couple. and keeping a wall, like a barrier between the two of you. And that's what makes things successful, because you're growing individually, but like coming together to support in what you're doing. And in toxic relationships, that barrier is completely broken down. Like there's no sense of individuality. There's no sense of like self-appreciation or like self-love, because all your worth is coming from one person. And most of the time that person is terrible at giving.
Well,
at giving it.
I have like a very personal connection to like you saying that. So when I didn't have like any of my own hobbies, like his friends started to become my friends. Like my whole world just revolved around like him and his needs. And I started to feel that I needed to have my own thing, because I completely lost that. And so Jess had done a yoga teacher training, and I recently had gotten into yoga, and one of the studio managers had like offered to sign up for the yoga teacher training, like me and one of my friends, and we're like, why not? We have nothing to lose. Like, let's just do it this summer. And Jess had such a great experience doing it that she was really an advocate of like me signing up for it. And when I did that, he was so pissed. And it's like most people would be so supportive and encouraging, and it was like, it's taking away from you being home. And I'm like, but you're not here, so why do you need me at home? And he really just hated it and had only negative things to say about it. But then also that's when he proposed to me, because it was almost like he felt like he was losing me, because I was finding this new group of friends that I was spending all this time with. I was constantly doing yoga. I was being more in touch with just like myself, and I had my own passion that I was really excited about, and he hated that. And I think his way of trapping me and kind of getting me back in was, oh, I'll propose to her.
Do you think, like, is there any part of you that wonders whether or not his identity was also codependent on you?
Yeah, probably. And it's weird. We kind of talked about that after we had broken up. We had a conversation of, you know, why he sort of did what he did. And something that he did share with me is he knew that he needed me to make him look like a better person. And having me kind of gave him this life that he knew he should have, but he just couldn't pretend anymore. And I think he has his own issues and things that he needs to work out with, but definitely he sort of needed me to like put on this facade that
So
he was
appearance driven, not so much like an emotional reliance.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Sure, but that's
a long time to be able to hold out on an appearance driven thing.
I know.
That's
wild of him
That's
to
crazy.
admit.
Yeah, it was. I think that was, like, a lot of people have asked me, like, do you have closure from the situation? Because obviously it's like, why even propose in the first place if you are unfaithful all the time, and if you're with this other person for such a long time, like having an affair with. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so bad. I'm so sorry. I knew exactly what I was going to know. And people have asked me if I've had closure on the situation. And that's like the closest I think I'll ever get. Like, I will never understand why he's done so many things that he has done, or why he made certain choices. But I think him sharing with that was like the closest I'll get to ever having any type of closure from a relationship.
It might have been the most genuine thing he's probably given you,
honestly,
too.
Probably. It's strange.
That's just interesting, because I feel like so many people, like especially with social media, like that the appearance of what's happening is like so important. And then like it's like those families that send out like holiday cards and like they're happy with like their puppy, and like they're, you know, after the camera goes away, they're like screaming and fighting and like, you know, miserable. But like the appearance of them to everyone else is like, well, look how happy they are. And I think that like it's really interesting that you say that, because we're so focused on appearance, like now with like social media and like all these other things, we only show like what we want people to see, that like when it's something different, it's like, oh, don't talk about that, or don't show that. So it's interesting.
You're good. That was a great segue, because we want to talk about that at some point. So.
I'm a therapist and I'm psychic, and
I think the idea of this structured timeline put a hindrance on a lot of people in general. I have a question for you, but I wanted to make a point. In like, when I removed the timeline of needing to get married and starting a family, when I removed that thought from my life changed like tenfold. Like I did a complete 180. Like after that stress of trying to figure out when that next step was, and started enjoying now, my life completely changed. But do you have like a different outlook now on like marriage and engagement? Like, does it hinder the way that you feel about it?
No, I definitely still want to get married. I think the next time around it will just be so different. I think it's really special when you can share an engagement or a wedding day with someone, and I think it's really important, especially if you're committed to being someone long term. I definitely think there are a lot of aspects that I will not involve myself in when it comes to engagements and planning a wedding, and I think the next time around, it's just like something that I want to keep more private and special between like me and whoever I decide to make that promise to spend the rest of my life with. And it won't be about like the engagement pictures or, the Instagram we're posting and things like that. It's just, I think it's changed it in like a positive way for me. It's more about like me and the person I'm with and less about everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, social media is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Love it and hate it.
There's so many, there's so many negative aspects and there's so many positive aspects as well. Mm-hmm. And it's so unfortunate because if we just learned how to use it, it could be so good. Like, we've had people that like say social media like saved their life, right? Mm-hmm. Like finding people that they could look up to and finding people they could, follow that inspired them, like has saved their life. But then on the other hand, you have such a vulnerable side of people that see these things and just want what they see, want this relationship, want these cars or house or life or...
Well, that's why you have to be careful how you influence. I think like if you're going to add your voice to the swell of social media, it has to be to send a good message. And that's, I mean, obviously that's what Becky and I are trying to do, and that's what I believe you two are trying to do. But Becky and I actually, we gave a talk at a college a couple months ago, and so we did a bunch of research on social media, and a very basic fact is that of the 7 point whatever billion people in the world, 3.4, so half, use social media. And that's only growing because as the elder generation who don't use it continue to pass on, we saturate that number. Yeah. And, I think that we have to be very careful with what we're doing on it. And if we're making people feel like they have to be in a relationship to post a matching onesie, on Christmas morning, like that's a scary fucking world that we're living in and contributing to.
Yeah.
Jess and I literally just had a conversation about this on the way over, and I was saying how, like, recently I had posted 2 pictures on Instagram, and one was how we wrote an article for a big media company, which was a huge deal for us, and we were so excited. And then one was, like, the first picture that I posted on my Instagram of me and my boyfriend, and guess which one got more likes.
Right.
And it's kind of like you're reinforced for that stuff. It's like, no, I wrote this article that I was so proud of and so excited to share with everyone, and it was such a huge thing for Jess and I to be a part of, but people were more excited that I finally have a boyfriend. It's like this poor unengaged girl has a boyfriend now, and that's what I'm like getting positive reinforcement for. So
it's unfortunate.
It is.
Yeah.
Because it's like less about you as a person and more about you as a couple, and it's, I mean, I don't think this is inarguable. Like, anytime somebody gets engaged or married or has a baby, those are the most liked photos.
Oh, yeah.
Without question.
Definitely.
Without question. And what is that saying? That we're, like, what message are we sending by liking that and commenting on that? I mean, of course, we're happy for the person for finding their happiness, but is it their happiness?
It's just like reinforcing like societal norms and like what's expected. Like, you get married and then you have a kid, and then like whatever else you do doesn't really matter because you've like succeeded because you've done these things. But like, that's not what makes everyone happy.
Right.
It was funny because I was talking to Sarah the other day, and for everyone listening, Kate and Sarah were on the first season. That's how we got connected with you guys. But I was talking to Sarah the other day, and she had said something to me about, like, oh, like, so when are you getting married? And, like, before I could finish my, like, response, she was like, that was such a dick thing to say. Like, she's like, I shouldn't assume if you want to get married. Like, and it's funny because, like, that's just our natural reaction of, like, oh, when are you having kids? When are you getting married? And it's been like a hard process of changing, that thought. And I like to ask people like what they're happy about now, like, or like
That's
what
a
their
good
passions
one.
are, what made you happy today, or what makes you happy in life. Even them rather asking about their jobs, because like it's so mundane, like asking about job, it's work for most people. Hopefully not,
Yeah.
not
like,
forever. But
even when you're going through something, like, you don't know if someone who's just got engaged, maybe they can't afford to have a wedding right now, or like maybe there's a personal thing, or maybe you ask them if they're having kids and they're struggling with that. Like, you never know what someone is going through, but like we're so just like ingrained to be like, oh, like this is like, even when Joe and I got engaged, I think we had like a 2-year engagement. I'm obviously terrible with dates and times, but we were engaged for a long time, and every time I felt like I'd see someone, they'd be like, oh, when's the wedding? And I'm like, I don't know, like we didn't plan it yet, we're in no rush.
So it was like, what's next, what's next,
right.
what's next? Like,
It's
enjoy the now.
Yeah, yoga teacher training taught us that, right? Like, enjoy the present.
I'm still working on it.
yeah, we talked about this in the first season. It's just like we always talk about how important it is for us to, as humans, to speak more in depth about what we're going through and our feelings, opposed to what people see on the surface. And we use the analogy of, imagine taking a bus, the same bus to work every single day, and you sit next to a person on the bus the same day, and you guys have the same banter, like, oh, how's the family, how's the kids, blah, blah, like the same mundane conversation. And like, and the two of you could be struggling with the same exact thing if you just had opened up a little bit more for each other. And that's, that's what we're trying to do. And that's what you guys are trying to do too, is, start this conversation. When you're out meeting someone at the bar, like meeting a new person, like ask a different question than those, ask them what they like to do for fun. Like that's a simple thing to ask, and it could turn into, a conversation that goes way beyond, or some type of connection that goes way beyond, even what you could imagine.
I mean, what's the most common exchange, right? How are you? Good. How are you?
And
Fine.
What's new?
What I noticed...
Are you really okay? No.
Like, I just had an epiphany, but like all of those questions that we're trained to ask, just like like if you have a job where like you're responsible for like client relations, or like having conversations with people, like your therapy probably asks open-ended questions, but like as people, it's like, how are you? Good. How are you? Great. It's not like you mentioned, what did you do that was fun last weekend? Like, open-ended is just like a closed dialogue. It's like you could be walking, in the office, and someone asked how you are, and before you could even respond, they're like in the bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Just taking a little bit more time and a little more patience.
I don't even respond to it. Like somebody will be like, how are you? And instead of saying good or great or fine, I'm just like, how are you?
Yeah.
And they don't respond either. And that was our entire exchange.
Yeah, and that's it.
That's like my favorite. I love asking like people I just meet, like those types of questions, because it's always just like, no one ever asks that. Like, and then it always ends up being like, I always find like the craziest people and have like the most amazing conversations with strangers. Yeah. I've been lucky that people feel like comfortable opening up to me. It's just a different life that I've tried to steer towards than the regular day. I go out and I meet people all the time. But I was going to ask, to get back a little bit on track.
Okay.
I want you to talk a little bit more about your experience with canceling, the big venue and the pressure that you felt, having this big wedding and everything that comes along with it, and then deciding to change.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, like, looking back, I was actually just talking about it recently with my husband, and I was like, did we ever really decide that we wanted to have, like, a wedding at a venue, or did we just kind of, like, start hearing from people, like, oh, when's the wedding? Where are you having it? What venues have you looked at? And, like, kind of, like, fell into it, and, like, we both agreed that it's just something that people ask these questions, and like you start thinking that this is what you're expected to do, and you kind of just like start going through the motion. So we were probably engaged for like I said, timeline, whatever, we were engaged for a while, and people were like, oh, when's the wedding? We're like, oh, we don't know, like, whatever, we're in no rush. And so eventually we're like, well, we should probably start like doing these things towards a wedding. And so I started looking at different wedding venues online, like the Knot and like all of those places, and like ballrooms, and just like going to these different venues. Like we went to a wedding expo, like no offense if you're into them, but like it was just a lot of
I didn't think those
Oh,
existed.
it
Yeah, they
exists,
do.
yeah. And I was like, why are we were really hungover too, but I was like, why are we here? You know what I mean? So we went and like got some ideas and eventually decided to book a venue that we thought was fine. Like I wanted to order my wedding dress online, which I did do because I didn't want to go to like this place and like try it on and have people look at me and be like, oh my God, I love it or I hate it, like whatever. So I found a venue that I felt like matched our personalities, which was a little bit more laid back and less traditional and ballroom-y. And then we booked it because we brought Joe's parents and they were like, I love it. We're like, great. So do we, which we thought we did at the time because we were thinking like, oh, this is what you do. You book a venue.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had all of our family come for a food tasting and the food was so bad. It was just like not at all what we were expecting. And Joe and I, what we did talk about wasn't ever the venues. Like when we talked about our wedding, it was like, we're going to have all of our friends and family there. There's going to be awesome dancing and music and food and fun. And like, those are the things that were important to us. So like, as soon as we had the food tasting, we kind of just looked at each other and we're like, we have to cancel this venue. Like not immediately, but we left and we were like, hey, bye. Thanks guys. And I was like, we're not having our wedding here. He's like, I know that hot dog was terrible or whatever, you know? So we decided to cancel our venue and obviously had deposits paid. And I don't think we had our save the date sent out yet. I think we had the save the date sent out, but we didn't have the
location.
Yeah. So like we still were stuck to this like timeline. Mm-hmm. So I remember talking to some of my family, like specifically my mom, and going through like right before we canceled, I'm like, I don't want to have a wedding at this place. Like, I feel like I'm just doing it because it's what everyone else wants. And like, I don't want to do it. And my mom's like, so don't do it. And I'm like, it's not that easy, Mom. And then I was like, actually, maybe it is. You know what I mean? So after conversations around that, we decided to cancel it and we planned a backyard wedding at my parents' house. And it was like more of like a, I don't know, clam bake sounds like weird. Like we weren't like, you know, whatever, but it was like really late.
Jersey.
Yeah, we had a clam bake, but we had like a big tent and there was music and like we had a very untraditional ceremony. But these are all things that like towards the end of us planning a wedding, we were able to realize is what we wanted. Like we didn't have a priest or a rabbi marry us because neither of us are like religious people. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like all of these things that were expected of us, we were kind of falling into the trap of doing because that's what you do when you get engaged. You then plan a wedding. Mm-hmm. And so we it was hard, but like eventually realized it wasn't what we wanted and changed it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because like I feel like if it's more of a norm to like be able to choose, then people will feel less pressure.
Yeah.
You know? Because I feel like I would like I'm like very jaded for wedding. Like I know so many people getting divorced right now that it's just like,
well, that's the thing, like we weren't having a wedding because, and I'm not saying that the people that got divorced had a wedding to just like have a wedding, but like we didn't, like we were excited about the wedding because again we really like our friends, family, and like good food, but like we were more excited to spend forever together. Like that wasn't the end of it. You know what I mean? So we were like, cool, whatever, like this one day is going to be a lot of fun, but like there's going to be so many other really exciting things after that. So I feel like for us, the wedding was like not as, I don't want to say important because like we had a great time, but like that's what it was, a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a wedding, like the amount of energy, time, money, effort that you're putting into your wedding day can detract from your marriage.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
You had said when we started the conversation though that like you weren't raised to really daydream or think of your wedding. Is that what you said?
Oh, no. Well, yes, I probably said that, but like what I meant is like I'm very weird and like like my mom wasn't like, are you thinking about your wedding? Cut it out, you know, like no nonsense. Like it was funny because like I was like, no, like I was actually with my mom and my sister the other day and like I love them both, but we're very different. And like I'm just like very like, she said it's like, I'm more like my dad, but like very logical and just like, you know, not very like outwardly emotional. And I'm just kind of like go with the flow type person. And so like, I just like, when I think of a wedding, I just get like uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to be standing in like front of a group of people being like, I love you so much because of this. Like I want to just keep that personal. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to share it with other people. So I wasn't told not to do it. It wasn't like frowned upon. Like if I wanted to have a princess wedding with like all of those things, like it would have been encouraged, but like it just was not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that becomes more special though, because it seems like you did what everybody should be doing, and that's making it about you and your love for your husband, and less about not even just societal expectations, but I'm sure many of us do it to placate our parents. you know, or you know, relatives or friends or cultures or religions or, you know, whatever it might be. Like, that's, you know, it's I don't know what good that's doing necessarily.
How long have you been married?
Oh God. 2016. Someone do the math. Like 4 years ish, almost 4 years. I have been married almost 4 years.
She says confidently.
Do you feel the pressure of kids?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like people just, like, always will be like, oh, you're married? Like, even at the nail salon, they see my wedding ring. They're like, oh, baby? I'm like, no babies, you know? Like,
how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
32. I'm like,
Are you sure?
guys, I think, like, what I've discovered today is, like, I don't understand math and numbers. I am 32.
But you're an excellent therapist.
Thank you so much.
Everyone has their thing.
Yeah. 32. Yeah.
Do your parents give you... I find I get most pressure from my parents.
Yeah. Well, I
my
feel
mom.
like you can only ask someone something so many times and, like, expect, like, people will always be like, oh, are you having kids? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have any yet. Like, you know what I mean? So who knows what can happen 10 years from now.
Kids
but
is such a personal question, too. Because, like, you know, some people can't have kids.
Yeah.
Some people are trying to have kids. They've been trying to have kids, and they're just keeping it secret. And then, like, some people don't have really the straight, like, access to having kids. And it's such, like, a... I don't know.
Yeah, but people just feel very comfortable asking. I'm like, I don't know.
I just went through that with... People feel very comfortable with asking personal questions in general.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of something.
What?
One time. Oh, this is even worse than asking someone. If anyone's listening and this saves you from doing this, just, like, don't do it. So, like, this one time I was at work and I was wearing, like, this outfit that I felt really cute in. And this is even worse than asking if someone has kids. And someone called me over and I was like, yes. And they were like, I was like, oh, do I have something, like, on my butt? And, like, this person looked at me and she goes, are you pregnant? And I was like,
I do.
no.
I was gonna-
And when I said no, she looked at my stomach and then she looked at me again and said, are you sure? And I
I
said,
witnessed this
So she doubled down.
conversation.
I said, I am sure, but if anything changes, I will name the child after you. Like, yeah. So, like,
It was bad.
if you're going to not ask anything, don't ask if someone's pregnant unless they're, like, very clearly.
No, just
Right.
don't
Yeah,
ask.
just don't
until
ask.
they
Just
tell
don't
you.
ask.
Yeah, unless
think
you're at
that-
their baby shower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're at their baby shower or, like, they are birthing child. Like, don't ask. So, yeah.
Once they announce it, then you can talk about
Yeah.
it. But
I just recently sold those pants on Poshmark.
yeah, she did.
Wait, do you want to hear... This is so off topic. Do you want to hear a funny story about
course.
Poshmark?
Always.
So, one of my really good friends... I don't use Poshmark, obviously. Well, not obviously. I don't use it. But one of my good friends uses it. I don't think you met her. And so I guess when you return something, you have to send a picture of it, like, too big or whatever to justify why you're returning it or something like that. Well, she had ordered pants and they were too big. So she took a picture and sent it. And then later went back and looked at the email and realized her tits were out in the picture that she sent.
Oh my god.
And she had and she emailed them back and was like, excuse me, but I think my breasts were exposed in the picture I sent. Can you please keep that private?
They were like, here's your refund and $20.
Oh
Thanks.
my God.
That's amazing.
I was not expecting the story to go that way at all.
I think about it often, and I'm like, there's like a few pictures, and I don't know how she just sent them. Like, her tits were just like out.
Well, it's like if you ever do like a Skype interview and they joke around and they're like, I'm not wearing pants, but like
Yeah,
maybe you're
maybe they're
actually
not.
not. No one would ever know.
But what you were saying before about, like, people being very comfortable with asking questions, it's crazy because, like, there's no rules, and we're not, like, taught about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And there's so many different types of people and situations that, like, it's really confusing. And I saw it, you know, the paralyzed community is very close knit to, like, my life. Like, I know a lot of people in it, and, you know, people always ask me, you know, well, does their bottom half function? And, like, a lot of the time, like, that's not that appropriate of a question to ask someone. Like,
Yeah,
are you going
right.
to ask someone if they can, like, regardless of what they do? But for me, it was like, well, like, I was basically, like, raised with people asking me how I have sex because I, like, date girls, right? Like, that's always the butt of everything. Well, like, what do you guys do? So for me, I don't think any questions are, like, off boundary because that's how
You're
I've,
used to
like,
it.
lived my life. But it's the same thing now. I find myself questioning what's appropriate with like same-sex couples having kids, and like is it appropriate to ask them like how, you know what I mean, like you know how they had it, like what process they went through. Do people get offended when you ask that? Because like I know people that get offended on both ends, and it's the same thing with like kids in general. Like, you know, what's the appropriate, there's like a weird, like, I've been just trying to teach myself and like talk to people that are like in this situation more, but it's also different for people. Like, I don't give a shit if someone asks me about my sex life.
Yeah. I think it also matters like what their intention is behind
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
Like if you're
or your
asking
relationship
someone,
with the person.
yeah, because you just are like purely curious or like judgment. Like if there's like, I don't know, if you're asking someone because you're curious and you think that maybe you're asking this couple in a same-sex relationship like how they had a kid, because in the future you might be considering having a kid. That's different than just being like, hey, how'd you have a kid? Like, great, have a nice day. You know what I mean? Like if you're genuinely interested in like those questions you're asking, I think like that's one thing. But
because if they could like help you in some type of way, and that's why you're going to them to ask.
Not because you're nosy.
All right. I don't know if there's any topics off the top of your head that you guys want to cover that we have not, that's important to you.
I mean, we covered Gold Club, so I'm pretty much done.
Because if you don't, I think it's okay if we wrap up, but what we like to do is ask for like some final advice. So if you want to maybe like think about some final words, incorporate anything we didn't get to touch, or whatever it may be. Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I guess
what I'm gonna say.
What are you gonna say? How am I supposed to know? My psychic abilities aren't picking this up. If I had to give any final advice, not stealing what Devin's gonna say, because I don't know. I would say that if you are in the process of planning an engagement, or you're going to be engaged, or whatever it may be, and you are looking at the wedding as kind of like the end point of it, picture yourself waking up next to this person for the rest of your life, because literally that's what marriage is about, and like the wedding is like one small little blimp. And so like if you're doing these things because you're excited to, like, not to say you shouldn't be excited, but if you're doing them for the purpose of like, you know, planning a wedding and like posting them online and like doing all the things that are associated with it, and not actually because you want to spend the rest of your life with this person, then like maybe take a step back and really consider if that's the right choice for you. And if it's not, that's okay, regardless of what you've invested.
Well, it's not for the fanfare.
Yeah.
Very
Do you?
well said.
I would say that everyone should remember that they're just so much more than their relationship, and they're so much more interesting in their relationship. Relationships are great and never want to deter you from being in a happy one. But just don't let it control your life or ever consume you. And another piece of advice is feelings are temporary. That's something that someone said to me, a therapist said to me, that just stuck with me, that you may feel one way today, but just remember that you might not feel that way tomorrow, and you didn't feel this way before. So you are able to move on, and
It's very true.
feelings you have will not last forever, and they have the ability to change, and things can get better.
I like that.
That's good.
That
You
was
should
good.
drop that mic right there. I don't know.
Yeah, if you were going to steal that, it's going to go down.
I was gonna. How do you even know
I know.
that?
You wouldn't have been able to.
Well, aren't you her therapist? That's it?
Yeah, that was actually me speaking through Devin.
That's funny. Laura, you have any final words?
I do. When you originally briefed us on this, not before this episode, I mean during the conversation, in my head I'm like, okay, this is cool. They're tapping into a much larger community to create a smaller one, so that people feel supported after they go through something pretty tragic. I think a called off engagement is pretty tragic. And then I was thinking about it, and as you were talking more about it, I realized that it doesn't have to be in support of a decision made. It's supporting you to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost preemptive, or it can be preemptive. It sounds like it's, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but you're trying to get to someone before they make the mistake of not calling off their engagement.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to prevent them from a future divorce or a life lived unhappily. Like, I think there's two ways to see what it is you guys are doing, and both are pretty fascinating. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's multi avenues of the way that you guys can help. I think that, you know, using your story may help someone, you know, prevent them from going through it, and then I think using your story will actually help someone that's going through it too. So it's
Right.
I mean, it's a great thing that you guys are doing, and definitely well needed. So if you're listening and this is something that relates to you, if you're in a relationship or in your toxic anything, you can reach out to them, you can reach out to us, we can connect you with them. What's your
If you
guys'
need a therapist, call Jess.
Yeah.
This is her new side hustle.
what's your
free.
guys' social?
So our Instagram is at DIY Breakup, and then we're at DIYBreakup.com.
Perfect.
Cool. Simple enough.
Yeah, and I think, and I always get so excited about every time we record these, because I just think about like the one person it's gonna help. You know what I mean? The one person's life that it's gonna change, and that's why we do this, because it's like it's exciting that we can have an impact on making this world a little bit better for someone. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out here.
Thanks for having us. See you at the Gold Club.
That was in unison.
I cannot wait for the Gold Club.
Gold Club. Gold. What are you guys
nervous.
doing now? I mean, it only took us about 2 hours.
We're going back to Philly.
Yeah.
Don't tempt
We'll
her.
talk. Yeah, we'll talk after. So thank you guys for listening. If you haven't done so already, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, do what all you need to do.
Really share this episode with a friend of yours that happens to be in a relationship that might not be the healthiest.
Yeah,
Everyone knows someone.
seriously.
Everyone knows someone.
Yeah. But yeah, whenever you guys are listening to this, night, day, morning, whatever.
I think that's it.
Hope you
At the Gold Club.
At the Gold Club. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And thanks.
Wow.
See you guys next week. You say wow? Goodbye.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting. Yeah. For the haters,